Chapter 20. In the ancient ruins of Ramosia, Nevin Said waited, his gaze settling on the crumbling altar. An old reminder of a price paid for freedom so long ago. Although many years had passed, he could still see the horror that once gripped the entire world of Nalu, could still hear the echoes of his brother's final scream as the dagger plunged into his chest. Blood drenched the altar and dripped onto the marble steps below. Said closed his eyes against the barrage of memories. He turned away and glanced at the sky for the 100th time. What was taking her so long? He twisted the braids of his beard until they pulled at the skin of his face. The Guardian Circle could not convene until she returned with her report. A flutter of wings drew Said's attention back to what was once the outer bailey. Nevin Leora flew over the broken walls. She wore a simple blue tunic and grey breeches, not what you would expect from a fairy who had once been queen. "Prazam, Leora, how are you?" Said asked as the fairy hugged his neck, her dainty toes barely reaching his midsection. "My dear Said." She pulled away and looked the headmaster over. Her violet eyes hadn't lost their sparkle. "It is so good to see you. Although I must say you have aged since our last parting." "I cannot say the same for you. You have appeared the same since the first day I met you." "Your vision and your memory must be failing," Leora chuckled. She flitted atop a crumbling wall and folded her iridescent wings against her back. Said shook his head. "I remember more than I would like. Have you finished your latest project?" Leora nodded. Her curls bounced around her head in wild excitement. "I finished the history of the Nagiso ages ago, although I have not settled on a title yet. I have few I am considering. Perhaps you could help me. I would value your suggestions." "Of course. But then what has kept you so busy? I have neither seen nor heard from you since the king's wedding." "Busy indeed," she nodded again. "I have nearly finished Irin's 3 Etsumar for Nevin Eldwin, a wonderful book discussing the variations among the elf kind of Nalu, and I'll soon begin illuminating Stradovek Glukvek con Roklam, a heavy tome detailing the Cloven Dwarves' rise to power and the construction of their great city." Her voice tinkled like chimes in the gentle breeze. If he had closed his eyes, he was certain she would have lulled him to sleep. He crossed his arms and leaned against the broken half-wall. "It is a pity none of the other races have been able to learn the art." "Yes." Leora grew solemn for a moment, and then snapped out of it with a bob of her head, sending her golden curls bouncing to and fro. "But no bother. I have heard that the Stoic dwarves are creating something in a matter of secrecy. They claim it will change the future of illuminated manuscripts." "I see." Said raised his eyebrows. "Well, I must speak with Adrian about it. Perhaps he would be able to enlighten us." "I doubt it. You know how those dwarves are." She pressed her lips together and she shook her head. He knew all too well. He rubbed his temples as an elf glided into the courtyard upon a brightly woven zraka. "I see you've brought Eldwin with you." Yes, I'm staying with the elves. But he could hardly keep up with me on his silly little rug. Dwarves are not known for their superior weaving skills. I do not think they were overly concerned about the appearance of the rug, but its ability to fly. No other nation has been able to create such a marvel." Leora snorted. "The Nagisu could have, but obviously we had no need for them." She glanced around. "Have the others arrived?" "Unai and Lasar are inside." He motioned toward what was left of the great hall. A few broken pillars and the stone outer walls remained. The wood long since decayed. Only squirrels and rabbits held court now. "We will find you in there." She nodded and flew off. Said turned to welcome Eldwin. The elf's long black hair and slender face still showed no signs of aging. How many centuries had he served as a guardian? And he still looked the same, except his grey eyes. They had lost their youthful glimmer of hope. Eldwin unfolded his willowy legs and stepped off the tapestry. He rolled it up and slid it into a bag that hung from his shoulder. Said brought his fingertips together briefly in the elven salutation. Eldwin did likewise. "Tridamore, Eldwin, are you still using the Raka?" Eldwin cocked his head. "I trust it enough, and it's faster and cleaner than a horse." You are either brave or foolish, Said smiled and grasped the other elf's shoulder. Neither. I am resourceful. Of course. And how is Zuriel? Peaceful and without mischief. I cannot say the same for the rest of Nalu. It seems someone is trying to bring the abyss upon us. The elf held up a small rolled parchment. What is the meaning of this? Said dropped his arm. I will explain soon enough. Is it true, then, the rumours I am hearing about Dagmar? Depends on what you've heard. Come, Lesar and Unai are waiting for us. Said turned to go. Eldwin grabbed Said's elbow. The Nutrazi, is it destroyed? Only in building, not the heart. His gaze settled on the old altar. Eldwin's grip tightened. And the students? A handful escaped, and those who were away in the observation phase are still alive. We can start over. Rebuild the school. We must. Uneven footsteps crunched over the rubble. Nevin Adrian shuffled into view, favoring his left foot, his bushy brown eyebrows furrowed in a constant state of petulance. The stout dwarf swung a heavy battle-axe down from his shoulder. Nevin Adrian, good to see you. Said bent to embrace the dwarf. A simple handshake would do, Said. Adrian shifted his weight to his right foot. Come, Said said. We have not seen each other in years. Yes, and it would seem only in time of need. Said snorted. I have always been available to assist the dwarf kind in their time of need. It is not my fault you are too stubborn to ask. Adrian squinted and tilted his head. And it is a good thing, too. These humans make enough trouble for us all. Mark my words, they will be the ones issuing in the final days of Nalu. I must agree with Adrian, Eldwin said. Perhaps the destruction of Nutrazi is a sign. Let us speculate, Said turned. Come, the others are waiting. He ushered them through the arched doorway and into what was left of the great hall. Inside, Nevin Lazar sat atop a large stone table, engrossed in a conversation with Unai and Leora. His black, dishevelled hair stuck out from his pale skin and crawled down the sides of his face. A simple dark tunic and pants covered his lithe form. At Said's approach, Lazar jumped off the table with the grace of a panther. Where is Nerissa? Leora asked as she settled on top of the stone table. The merfolk are on the other side of the world. Lazar settled on a makeshift chair and added, I would not expect her any time soon. Right, Unai scratched his round belly. Her old dragon is probably winded. I doubt that beast can make it all the way here without a rest or two. Adrian chuckled, but Unai glared at him. That was not meant to be funny. Adrian shrugged and shuffled past, as if you knew anything about dragons. He found some dislodged bricks, dragged them over to the table, and stacked them across from Unai. When he had finished, he sat eye level with the others. What? Unai raised his hands. You do not like our seating arrangements? Adrian raised a bushy eyebrow. I like to see the people I am speaking with, unlike you, who would rather eat your way through the conversation. Guardians, please, Said grimaced. Lazar shook his head and crossed his arms. Why have you called this urgent meeting? Are the Haruza so far removed from Nalu they know nothing of the attack on Dagmar? Eldon slid his bags from his back and sat down next to Adrian. Lazar shrugged. We are. I do not deny it, but I doubt the elves know much more. A loud shriek rattled the old buildings. Said glanced up and held his breath. A large dragon soared above, blotting out the sun. It dropped from the sky, and the earth trembled as it landed in the outer bailey. The great reptile stretched out its leathery wings one final time and folded against its emerald body. An older woman sat in its leather saddle. She gathered a grey robe and slid to the ground. Her white hair swung in several braids down her back. Her silvery skin glinted in the sun. Opalescent colors danced as she strode toward them. Naweliha Nevin Narisa. Said touched his fingertips to his lips and bowed. That was quite an entrance. Naweliha, Edmaster. Nerissa returned the bow. What news do you bring us? The perimeter remains untouched. I saw nothing out of the ordinary among the pillars. The griffins are healthy and well sustained by their appointed villages. Her words rolled off her tongue like waves at sea. The Manoa stones are smooth and vibrant. They display no signs of aging as of yet. Thank you, Nerissa. Saeed nodded and motioned for her to join them. We were just about to get started. Nerissa sat at the table, her movement graceful and purposeful. She glanced around at the others and nodded her head. I see Nevin Darren is not here. He has been detained for the moment, but he will arrive soon. Saeed scanned the familiar faces before him. He had led the Guardian Circle for the past 5 centuries and had grown quite fond of them. Much like a father, he had enjoyed watching them grow and mature before his very eyes. Out of the 8, he would have to choose his successor, and soon. Death's fingertips tickled his soul. He sighed. Of all the times he could have led Nalu against such an attack, it would have to be now, an aging elf whose best years had been spent. Couldn't his time end in peace? Nevins of the Guardian Circle. Saeed scanned their faces. His heightened sense brushed against their well-guarded minds. 3 nights ago, an army of 100 men, a legion of imps, and a giant troll attacked Dagmar. The vault has been emptied of its secrets, and the sacred pearl has been taken. The guardians stared at him. Shock and confusion poured from their minds, and then anger swallowed the rest of the emotions. He girded his thoughts again and waited. The dragon's breathing measured the silence. "Do you know who did this?" asked Lazar. "I believe it was one of our own." Saeed nodded at Unai. "An apprentice of mine." Unai closed his eyes and his shoulders slumped. "His name is Imarin, but I do not think he did this all for his own personal gain." Saeed nodded. "The men who attacked carried the Musal banner." "But how can that be? Steigen has been banished to the abyss. Who would embrace such monstrosity?" Leora stamped her foot and tightened her small hands into fists. "This generation mocks the sacrifices of our ancestors. They know not the significance of their rash and thoughtless behavior." "Calm yourself." Saeed lifted his eyebrows. "You are perhaps one of the few remaining who have witnessed the death and destruction perpetrated under his tyranny. But we are not ignorant of it. If people had not seen it, it does not mean they have not heard of it." "Only in the songs of bards." Leora crossed her arms. "And then the people are too drunk to remember." Unai cleared his throat. "People still fear him, despite his defeat and the strength of the perimeter." "Perhaps they do not fear him enough." Adrian eyed the others. "Steigen is not the one we should fear." Saeed glanced around the table. "He was merely the vessel." The dwarf grunted. "What fool would kidnap the pearl and seek to frighten the Guardian Circle with a bit of black cloth?" "I can think of one." Eldwin leaned forward. "Samine." Unai shook his head. "Her past offense places her under suspicion, but we have no evidence as of yet." "Then why not find some evidence and banish her to Durka?" Leora strutted across the table toward Unai, her hands on her hips. "If she embraces the Musal, why not banish her to the abyss so that she may taste the horror of Steigen's tyranny?" Lazar leaned his elbows on the table and peered over his fists. "Even if she is the one behind the attack, and we banish her to the abyss, it won't solve the heart of the problem." Saeed nodded. Lazar was an ambassador who had watched his nation fall away from Nalu. If anyone could see the path the nations were rushing down, it would be him. "I am afraid that the Guardian Circle is failing," Saeed said. The Guardians broke out in protest, but he raised his hand to silence them. Imarin's mentality is merely a reflection of a greater apathy permeating the plains and slowly infecting the rest of Nalu. Look at Arashel, no longer part of the council, returning to the old ways. And what about Zuriel? "Zuriel?" Eldwin said, standing. "The humans of the Prathay have ushered this mentality in, embracing the Nuja, falling away from Karasi's edicts, and neglecting the law of Tharin." Durka is the perfect example. How can we banish criminals to a desolate place and expect you? Unai slammed his palms on the table. Well, it's a lot better than chopping their hands off for thievery or a hangman's noose for trespassing as is done in Ereshel. Is it, Unai? Eldwin leaned forward. Branding not only the thieves and murderers, but their children as well. We are creating generations of outcasts and criminals. Not to mention a population ripe for war, Said added. What do the elves know of criminals and punishment? You live separate from the rest of us. But tell me, where do your pirates and murderers go? Unai asked. Fellow guardians, please, Said interrupted. We do not always agree with the decisions the rulers of Nalu make, but it is our duty to teach them and protect them. True, Eldwin folded his arms and sat down. But one cannot teach a person who does not want to learn. And here we are. Nerissa held out her hands, the movement graceful despite her age. Of course, she wasn't as old as Said. He rubbed his fingers together, unable to hide the tremors any more. Nerissa's fluid voice continued, her features stoic. Karasi kidnapped, and the Neutrazi destroyed. Clearly, this is an attack against the Guardians. What other evidence do we need? Have I missed anything? A husky voice asked. A tall man strolled into the room. A leather eye patch stretched across his bald head while his good eye surveyed the assembly. Not a thing, Darren. Adrian tilted his head all the way back. Only the end of the Guardian circle. The other Nevins nodded their greeting while Darren settled into the chair next to Adrian. A golden eagle landed next to him and began preening its feathers. Payundunai, Darren, Said said. What did you find out? King Voldemort has been thrown into the dungeons, while Lord Dirk reigns in his place. A stunned silence descended on them. How? Eldwin asked. Was there no battle? None, thanks to Captain Whiston, and as far as we can tell, a curse that has stretched beyond the walls of Badara. Darren glanced over at Said. You were correct. The inhabitants of Talem are affected. But it would seem the curse did not reach Prayton. King Taman will allow us to meet there. Said nodded. Good. What curse? Eldwin asked. We do not have all the details yet, Said faced the elf, but during the Feast of Deju, a spell was cast. I did not see it, but it gave me a tremendous headache. That proves it, then. Hadrian slammed his fist on the table. Dirk's presence is enough evidence of Samin's involvement, and if she was the one responsible for the spell, she will be tried for high treason. She has gone from a deserter to a full-fledged sorceress. The sky filled with a hum of flapping wings. The guardians drew their swords. Harpies? Had the perimeter failed? Said's heart told him neither. He glanced around. Beyond the broken walls of the hall, the dragon only yawned and slumbered on. A beast like him had nothing to fear. The rays of the afternoon sun refracted on a shimmering cloud as it descended upon them. A small man, about the size of a cat, landed on top of the small table. 30 or so other similar winged men settled in the large arched windows. Nagiso! Laser sheathed his sword. What? Where did you all come from? Queen Leora. The lead fairy knelt on one knee. The other fairies whispered among themselves and bowed. Eloith? Leora's eyes brimmed with tears. Captain Eloith! You are alive! She darted across the table and embraced him. Where have you been? How are you here, alive? We have been held captive in our own dungeons. Ayianna helped us escape. She told us of the meeting here, but she and her companions are now lost in the tunnels of Grenz. I am afraid they are heading for Nanganjo. We must send help. Said closed his eyes and whispered, May Vituko have mercy on them.